I was certain she was going to ask about Soviétu, or perhaps Prince Heinrich or Viscountess Verdi. I didn't expect her to ask about this. Duchess Tania, why her? I stared at Rashta, and she answered in a small voice. Is Duchess Tania easy? I thought I heard wrong. Easy? What do you mean by that? I frowned at her, and she carefully examined my face. Are you upset? Duchess Tania is a good person and a good friend. Well, Rashta hesitated, twisting her hands together. There are always men at Duchess Tania's side. The Duchess seems to enjoy being with men too. I don't know if that's allowed when she's already married. She looked up in embarrassment, then waved her hands in protest. Rashta is not asking for bad reasons. Rashta is asking because she doesn't understand. Duchess Tania is popular with everyone, both men and women. She didn't seem to believe me. But at the parties she was always with men. I sighed. She was asking me because she didn't understand? That was worse in my view. It was better if she had some idea what she was saying, but if she was asking out of ignorance, she could unintentionally tarnish someone's reputation. At the very least, it was fortunate that she was asking this when there were only the two of us. It only appears that way at parties, because men and women pair together to dance. There is nothing wrong with Duchess Tania, so don't say anything else like that from now on. Rashta gave a small yes, and I turned around and walked back to the Western Palace. However, even after I returned to my room and spoke with my ladies-in-waiting, Rashta's strange question continued to gnaw at me. Why would she ask about Duchess Tania? Presently Rashta was disliked and shunned in society. Although the popular Duke Elgi sided with her, it would not be easy to restore her image. If she was interested in gossip then by any chance. Countess Eliza, yes, Your Majesty. Are there any bad rumors about Duchess Tania recently? Not that I know of. Is that so? I heard that Viscount Langdale has been utterly lovesick since he danced with Duchess Tania at New Year's. Countess Eliza gave a chuckle at the story. He must be completely wild about her. Noblemen falling in love with Duchess Tania was not an unusual occurrence. I wondered if Rashta was trying to shift the topic of gossip towards someone else. Was I worrying for nothing? Well, in any case, Rashta didn't have the social clout to influence people. It had only been a day since Duke Elgi met her as well, and there was no way he could spread strange rumors for her either. However, I felt uneasy as I remembered the way Rashta constantly glanced at Duchess Tania at the New Year's ball. Why do you ask, Your Majesty? Did you hear something? Rashta asked. Countess Eliza's face twisted. Why would she do that? I don't know, just tell me right away if you hear anything strange. I kept busy with preliminary research about Rift. I compiled information from tourists, merchants, and explorers who were recently at the Wa continent, but their time was spare and they couldn't abandon their jobs. I was so busy that I forgot my birthday was coming. Surprisingly, it was Soviétu that brought it up. It takes several hours to go to the villa by carriage, so we should finish up our work and leave the day before. I was just finishing the imperial budget before submitting it for approval to Soviétu. At Soviétu's sudden reminder, I put my feather pen down on the inkwell. It took me a few seconds before I realized what he was talking about. Birthday, oh goodness. Soviétu chuckled as if he found my dazed reply amusing. The Empress really doesn't care about anything when she gets into her work. It was a teasing remark. Can you guess whose birthday I was talking about? I remember now. You should remember your own birthday. Do you mind if we leave a day early? I'll schedule it. I flipped through my schedule, and Soviétu spoke up again. Do you remember the tree planted at the villa? I nodded, and Soviétu stretched himself lightly as he reminisced. It was when you were still crown princess, and very small. You were cute back then. This time I smiled. In the Eastern Empire, there was a story of a wish tree, and superstition had it that if you made a wish while planting a tree, it would come true. When I was a princess, I was very short for my age, and I found it especially stressful when I was always surrounded by adults. After worrying alone, with no one to share these feelings with, I finally planted a wish tree. The rule was that I had to shovel the ground and plant the seedlings myself. However, I was young and small, and after a few hours of inefficient digging, I hugged the seedling and passed out from exhaustion. When I woke up, I found Soviétchu digging the hole. Your Highness, if you dig, I'll have to do it over again. It's all right, we're a couple. A couple is like one body, so it doesn't matter if you or I do it. Really, yeah. That's what my father the Emperor said. Shoveling was a tough job, so I relented and allowed Soviétchu to do it. After digging a decent-sized hole, I placed the seedling in it and covered the base with dirt. I put my hands together and made a wish, and Soviétchu said, "What did you wish for?" I asked to be taller. Why, it's nice to be small. I follow the Empress and she always goes beyond a partition. But the screen is bigger than me, so I can't see. After that I felt unwell with body aches, and Soviétchu got into trouble because his palms were ragged. Soviétchu was always taller and stronger than I was, but he was still young too. The ends of my mouth tipped up in a smile. When I looked at Soviétchu, I saw him smiling as if he were remembering as well. But that tree worked, didn't it? Now you're very tall. I smiled wordlessly, picking up the feather pen again and looking down at my papers. A bitter feeling mixed in with the memories. After all, my wish was not about my height. Back then I prayed that Soviétchu and I would keep a good relationship for the rest of our lives. But it didn't come true. Gifts from friends and relatives began to arrive 5 days before my birthday. My family was moneyed, but after I became empress I lived a more luxurious lifestyle. Of course, much of my wealth was spent on various welfare projects and state subsidies, and I didn't often buy things for my own pleasure. Because of this, most of the gifts given to me were meaningful, rather than expensive. Especially the one my mother sent me. The Duchess must have been worried about you, Your Majesty. I smiled awkwardly as Countess Eliza poured through my mother's gift, a semi-annual magazine called La Trang, which contained portraits of the most popular actors of the day. My mother sent me one that featured only male actors. It was not meant to hurt Soviétchu, but perhaps she thought that taking my own lover would settle my mind, and actors were a popular choice among nobles. Ah, this one's wonderful. Look at this man, Your Majesty. His shoulders are so broad. Isn't this one better? That one has bad rumors about him. What rumors? His sexuality is apparently rather strange. Well, I'll keep them anonymous. A baroness said that she and that actor tried to play with fire, and she ended up nearly burning for real. Really, the ladies-in-waiting seemed to enjoy the gift more than I did. Meanwhile, my father had sent me the latest fashionable dresses, as well as rare books, fabrics, and jewelry from abroad. There was also an anonymous gift called the Elixir of Love. It was too awkward for me to use. It was 2 days before my birthday. Most of the presents had already arrived, and by tomorrow morning I would leave for the royal villa. I packed a suitcase for 2 days and spread several books on my bed. As I was deciding which ones to take, I heard the sound of wings pattering in the air. Queen I rushed to the half-opened window and widened it even further. It was Queen, but he couldn't easily enter the room like usual. His small head bobbed in and out of the window frame, and when I looked over I saw him carrying a large box tied with string. Queen surprised, I stretched out my hand, and Queen deposited the box and flew through the window. He fell onto my bed and panted for breath. Did you bring this by yourself? I tested the box Queen brought. It was quite heavy even in my hand, and I was surprised that he carried this himself. He was a large bird, but he was still a bird. Queen lifted his head, nodded helplessly, then flopped again. Prince Heinrich has gone too far. He should have come in person or asked someone else to bring it here. Why are you shaking your head? Didn't Prince Heinrich make you do this? You don't like me saying bad things about Prince Heinrich? He nodded his head. All right, I'll be nice. Queen had no energy to lift himself up, and settled in with a flop of his wings. I patted his rear. He was so startled that he jolted, but then he went limp as if he were feeling weak again. I sat beside Queen and put the box on my lap. What in the world did Prince Heinrich send? Inside was a large cake, and on the lid of the box was a letter. I opened it to read the contents. I think I'm good at cooking. I hope someone will compliment me. Queen had risen and seated himself quietly next to me, and stole a glance in my direction. I placed one hand over Queen's shoulder, and dipped a finger from my other hand into the frosting and placed it between my lips. It had a simple, sweet taste of fresh cream without any greasiness. Did he make the cream all by himself? It's delicious, I laughed, and Queen shook his tail and rubbed his head against my arm. It must have been heavy. Thank you for bringing this to me, Queen. I'll thank Prince Heinrich separately. Your owner is a very nice person. Haha, why are you so embarrassed? I placed the cake to one side, then placed Queen on my lap and kissed his forehead. He turned completely into stone. I found his reaction so amusing that I smothered him with more kisses here and there. Afterwards I took the cake to the table, cut a slice and placed it on a place. I soon discovered that the cake wasn't the only gift. I let out an involuntary gasp. Embedded in the soft sponge were jewels of various sizes and color. I plucked one out and discovered it was a blue-colored diamond. I felt a poke, and turned and saw Queen blinking up at me with his large purple eyes, as if he was worried about my reaction. He looked so serious that I couldn't help but answer honestly. It's a little too much. It was acceptable to receive gifts even more extravagant than this from a foreign delegation. But Prince Heinrich had given this as a friend. The cost wasn't a problem to him, of course, but the meaning of the gift was ambiguous. I set the jewel aside, and when I saw Queen I looked at him in surprise and hugged him. Why are you crying, Queen? Because Queen had burst into tears and flew away, I decided to visit the southern palace myself. It'll be fine as long as I don't stay too long. I want to thank Prince Heinrich for the cake anyway, but I was mostly worried about Queen. Oh, my Empress Navier! A knight of the Western Kingdom was astonished when he saw me. I was in front of the quarters where Prince Heinrich was staying, and another knight with blue hair came rushing towards me. He recognized me, but more than that, his gaze indicated that he seemed to know something. My ladies-in-waiting knew that Prince Heinrich and I exchanged letters, and there had to be someone on his end that knew about me as well. Still, I had to guard myself to those even close to the prince, so I smiled faintly at him. I have a message for Prince Heinrich. Is he inside? I'm glad you came. I was worried because he came here crying. The prince came crying? I'm sorry. Oh, no, not the prince, the bird. It's a bird. The prince's mean bird came crying. The blue-haired man added that the prince never cried, then hurriedly knocked on the tightly closed door and shouted, Prince, Her Majesty the Empress is here. About 3 seconds passed. I thought I heard a loud noise from inside, perhaps something like falling furniture, but then it was silent. I looked at the blue-haired knight to see if everything was all right, but it seemed unperturbed by the loud noise coming from the room. A few minutes later, the knight opened the door after a signal that it was okay to come in from the inside. Thank you. I slowly entered the room, curious to what that was all about. Prince Heinrich's room was clearly of the southern palace, yet it was somehow unfamiliar. His scent lingered faintly in the air, and there were unusual items scattered here and there. Prince Heinrich, standing in the middle of the room, was the most familiar thing in this strange space. I'm sorry, I had something else to do. As I quickly looked around the room and stared at him, the prince smiled and kissed me on my hand before stepping back. Something else? Did that mean he was washing up? It looked like he had hastily thrown on his clothes. He usually had nary a wrinkle on his carefully selected attire, but he looked rather rumpled at the moment. I could see his skin peeking through the loose buttons of his shirt, but it would be awkward if I pointed it out. It wasn't like there weren't people that wore their shirts like that. I turned my eyes on the prince's face, wondering whether to ignore it or point it out, only to see something that caught me by surprise. His eyes were red and there was a wetness on his eyelashes. It was obvious that he had been crying a little while ago. I shouldn't have come. This was bad timing. I awkwardly turned away my gaze. Did he cry while taking a bath? How embarrassing it must be for him to visit so suddenly. I was truly sorry. Did you receive the cake? However, because it was strange to have a conversation without looking at his eyes, I finally turned my head again. Prince Heinrich was staring at me with moist purple eyes. I heard that animals often take after their master. Was this the reason? Suddenly I realized that Prince Heinrich's eyes looked very similar to Queen's. Oh no, did you not get it? It wasn't until the prince questioned me again did I manage to shift my focus away from his wet eyes. I just wanted to come here to say hello and thank you. Thank goodness. I was worried Queen wouldn't deliver it properly. Yes, it looked a little heavy for him to carry. I wanted to take it myself, but Queen insisted on carrying it himself. He's unexpectedly strong, so don't worry. Prince Heinrich gave a languid smile, but his eyes were still misty, making him look less arrogant and proud than usual. Would you like a cup of tea? Oh, was the cake delicious? It was delicious. Did you make it yourself? It's a hobby. I even have my own kitchen in the West. Are you good at cooking? I've never done it before, so I don't think I am. I have heard that those who can cook and those who can are made for each other. I suppose that means the Queen and I are meant to be. That story was unfamiliar to me. I looked at him with a frown, and he turned red and scratched his nose. I suppose the saying doesn't cross countries. I suppose not. Is there something you wanted? Your Highness, I wanted to see Queen. Queen, why so suddenly? He was crying so hard when he left. I'm worried about him. As I spoke, I paid attention to signs that Queen was somewhere in the room. However, I could neither hear nor smell a bird. Prince Heinrich smiled awkwardly. There's nothing I can do. Queen went hunting. Hunting? I don't know exactly what exactly he went hunting for, but he goes out alone to fly in the capital. Did he come in crying? Somewhat, but he was quite all right. The blue-haired knight worried that Queen came crying, but Prince Heinrich said otherwise. I couldn't help but be curious, but Prince Heinrich looked calm. If the owner said it was all right, then it had to be. I nodded reluctantly. I see, that's a relief. I nervously brushed the skirt of my dress. There was nothing else I had to say. I said, I'll see you again, and glanced towards the entrance as a signal that I wanted to leave, and Prince Heinrich quickly strode forward to open the door. He didn't stop there, however, and followed me as I stepped outside. I looked at him curiously, but he simply smiled and asked me which direction I was going. So how was the gift? I pointed to one direction, and Prince Heinrich fell into step beside me. When I glanced back briefly, I spotted the blue-haired knight, who ducked his head hurriedly when our eyes met. I turned my head around again. Queen, was the gift not to your liking? I liked it, thank you, Prince Heinrich. Wasn't it too much? How did he know that? I looked up with a start, and Prince Heinrich explained with a faint smile. I was a little worried. Of course I am friends with you, but we haven't known each other for a long time. I thought you might feel burdened. I see. I hope you don't feel pressured. The Western Kingdom is a jewel capital, and many of the mines are owned by the imperial family. Feeling relieved, I nodded, and the prince smiled and placed one hand on his chest. Thank goodness. I was worried. I can see why you're mistaken to be a womanizer. What, it's because you're friendly and caring. I'm not a womanizer, Your Majesty. Of course I believe that. You shouldn't completely believe this face. Well, at the New Year's celebrations he had laughed when I said I didn't believe the rumors he was a womanizer. He smiled awkwardly, and murmured in a gloomy voice. It's because of my friend. He truly is a flirt. Duke Eliie, you heard of him? Is there any noble who hadn't heard rumors of the two of them? But instead of being honest, I asked more questions about the Duke Eliie. Duke Eliie recently came to the Southern Palace. Did he say he liked it here? After he arrived, most of what I heard about him had to do with him and Rashta. It was said he often accompanied Rashta, and there was no mention of Prince Heinrich, who was supposed to be a close friend. That was why I questioned Prince Heinrich, to know if he and Duke Eliie had a fight. Prince Heinrich's expression subtly shifted. I stopped walking for a moment in worry, and Prince Heinrich stopped as well. As a matter of fact, Your Majesty, I have a favor to ask of you. He completely sidestepped my question. What is it? I've been worried about how to say it. Now that you brought it up, I think I'd better ask for a favor. Stay out of sight in front of Duke Eliie. What did you mean by this? I looked up in amazement, but Prince Heinrich looked more serious than ever. Can you do that? But why? Any woman who gets entangled with the Duke Eliie is doomed to unhappiness. Sometimes he's like a living cursed doll, or a real ghost story. If you catch his eye, was this a joke, a form of flattery? I smiled, but Prince Heinrich lowered himself slightly so that his brilliant purple eyes were level with me. I'm telling you, please never ever look beautiful in front of him. It was the day before my birthday. As we were only staying at the villa for 2 days, I didn't have much pack. I wore comfortable, low-heeled shoes instead of my formal ones, and donned a waterproof cape in case of rain. Enjoy your vacation, Your Majesty. Countess Eliza, who was not accompanying me on my trip, carefully fixed my buttons, and mentioned she was thinking of going home for the 2 days I was gone. Don't worry, Countess Eliza. I will take care of her. Countess Jubal laughed and patted Countess Eliza on the back, who narrowed her eyes and lowered her hands. I smiled as I watched the two opposite personalities exchange glances without speaking. Let's go. When I arrived at the central palace, I found Soviétch standing in front of the carriage. He was dressed in his usual formal clothes, and I didn't see his luggage or his servants following him. I gave him a questioning look, and Soviétch explained with a regretful expression. I have a matter to attend to. Can you go ahead? Is it that urgent? You don't have to push yourself to go to the villa. It's urgent, but not completely so. It is not an issue that the empress needs to visit for her birthday. I didn't mind, but I decided not to answer. Soviétch smiled softly and wrapped his arms around my shoulders. You need rest after all the hard work you've done. After I finish my work, I'll leave in the evening. The villa was 12 hours' journey away from the capital. If he left in the evening, he would travel all night until morning. I was worried, but it had to be fine. Come to think of it, sitting face to face with Soviétch would be supremely awkward, and so I climbed into the carriage without protest. Countess Jubal fell asleep as soon as she got into the carriage, while I spent my time reading a book. That was for about 2 hours, until motion sickness from the swaying of the carriage overwhelmed me. I closed my book and looked out the window. The carriage was on a well-maintained road leading out of the capital, and I saw yellow farmlands stretching out before me. Farmers and scarecrows were scattered about the field, and somewhere I could hear children's laughter. I hope this trip will improve the relationship between you and the Emperor. I turned my head and saw Countess Jubal yawning. Our eyes met and she shrugged. I couldn't say that in front of Countess Eliza. It's difficult for nobles to divorce, Your Majesty. There are many political complications and disagreements about how to divide assets. Who would take more benefits? But if one doesn't care for the loss, one can divorce at any time. But I can. It's a shame, but yes. You're the Empress. No matter how much you hate the Emperor, you cannot initiate divorce first. So it's better to get along. Countess Jubal began to nod off again. I leaned my head against the backrest with both hands on my knees. I agreed that it was better to be on good terms with the Emperor. However, there was something that I could not agree with Countess Jubal on. Divorce? Could I improve our relationship just because I couldn't divorce him? It was this part that I disagreed with. To others, the fact that I wasn't in a position to divorce Soviétch may elicit sympathy. In any case, there was no way that anyone treated poorly by their spouse wouldn't be pitied. Soviétch was completely blind when it came to Rashta, and occasionally ended up accusing me because of it. But even if I could get divorced, I had no desire to do so from Soviétch. I was groomed to be the Empress from an early age, with rigorous training and specialized education throughout my childhood into adulthood. I didn't know if I fit the aptitude or not, but to be Empress was my destination in life. It would be a lie if I said that I was alright with my husband bringing in a concubine and treating me coldly. Our marriage was political, however, and while it was hard, I could carry the burden. I didn't want to lose my lifelong work simply because Soviétch loved someone else. If there really came a situation where I could tolerate it no longer, then perhaps. Your Majesty, look at this. Rashta ran to Soviétch with an engraved pendant given by Duke Elgi from Blue Bohemian. Your Majesty. Rashta burst into the room with a large smile, and then stopped in surprise. Rashta covered her mouth as she stared at Soviétch before her. Your Majesty, you look wonderful. He was dressed in a black and white suit, different from the fancier outfits of the New Year's celebration. He smiled weakly, not looking in the mirror. Rashta quickly went to his side and admired him from top to bottom. You look good everywhere. Aren't you being too shameless by looking this handsome? You flatter me. Rashta gave a small giggle, then held out her hand to him. Look at this, that's the crest of Blue Bohemian. Your Majesty's genius. You recognized it right away? Rashta's eyes widened in admiration again, and Sovietski gave a small smile and rubbed her back with one hand. It was a strange reminder that Rashta was from another world, as nobles were almost obligated to memorize the crests of other houses. Why are you dressed so nicely? She placed the pendant in her pocket. In truth, she had shown the pendant from Duke Eliie to Sovietski because she wanted him to be jealous. She was taken aback when he seemed rather calm, however, as if he were ignorant of her intentions. I told you a few days ago. I have to go to the royal villa. Rashta thought you were supposed to leave by morning, but it was cancelled. You said you'd be back the day after tomorrow, right? Sovietski glanced at the clock and nodded. Make yourself comfortable here, Rashta. Sovietski lightly kissed Rashta's cheek and turned away. Rashta will see you off. She followed him enthusiastically, rambling away about her day. While Viscount Rotesha had completely destroyed her reputation, Duke Elgie's appearance had slowly drawn back some of the nobles to her. She was both happy and relieved, and she wanted to tell all of this to Sovietski. She stopped speaking, however, when she saw a silver jewelry box inside of Sovietski's carriage. Her eyes widened. What is that? It's a present for the Empress. Empress? Rashta's eyes widened even further. You're taking it to the villa, it's the Empress' birthday. After Sovietski's reply, Rashta looked surprised and questioned him again. Who's going there? It will be the Empress, myself, the servants, and the knights. There are no guests other than a lady-in-waiting. Why? Rashta covered her mouth with her hands. She looked so alarmed that Sovietski frowned at her. Are you all right? Rashta didn't know it was the Empress' birthday. Oh, is that so? No one said anything. We want to be as quiet as possible. It's not an open party, so only close friends or relatives know. Viscountess Verdi could have mentioned it. She would have known. Sovietski smiled when Rashta pouted her lips. You must be unhappy to only find out about her birthday now. We're still family. Rashta could have given something. Sovietski gave a chuckle. You're very kind. Rashta twisted her fingers. Well, it was about time for Sovietski to leave. The coachman looked over at the pair of them. I'll see you soon, Rashta. If I leave too late, it will be difficult for the coachman to drive. Sovietski took a step into the carriage when Rashta quickly grabbed his sleeve. Rashta, he turned around curiously. Can you take Rashta too? You. Sovietski blinked in surprise, and she nodded hurriedly. Rashta couldn't get a gift for the Empress, and if Rashta doesn't celebrate her birthday, she will be disappointed. Sovietski couldn't undo the skeptical expression on his face, and he was unconvinced that Navier would be disappointed by a lack of gift. However, he couldn't say that the Empress would probably dislike it if Rashta came along. Bring Rashta with you, Your Majesty. She can liven the mood. The mood? She mimed drinking alcohol, and Sovietski replied with a faint smile. You don't have to do that much. Still, let Rashta go. It's a family party, and I'm family. I'm sorry, it will only be myself and the Empress. Rashta's cheeks puffed out, and she folded her arms. Oh dear, you're sulking. Sovietski laughed and pinched her bright red cheek. Do you really want to come? I don't like when you're alone with another woman. You didn't protest when I brought up the villa the other day. I thought you were going alone or in a group for work. Rashta was being cute and energetic, and the carriage driver gave an involuntary chuckle. She quickly looked down at her toes. Sovietski checked his watch, then stroked her shoulders soothingly. Later it can just be the two of us. Is that enough? When on Rashta's birthday? Yes, Rashta prefers being in groups. All right, but Rashta likes being with you alone, Your Majesty. You are a greedy person. He grinned at her, and she quickly put her arms around him. Rashta wants a lot of people for her birthday, and then have you alone later. Her delicate scent tickled his nose. Sovietski kissed her lightly on the cheek and answered, yes, before boarding. The carriage driver snapped the reins, and Rashta waved at the retreating carriage. Before it disappeared completely, she lowered her arm. Sovietski had promised he would spend time with her later, But now he would be alone with the empress. She tried not to worry. She couldn't have stopped him even if she had known in advance it will be all right. The emperor and empress are in a typical marriage. Rashta slapped her cheeks and returned to her room at the Eastern Palace. She would have a glass of champagne and a good night's sleep. However, someone was already waiting for her there. Her heart dropped to the floor when she recognized the despicable figure standing in the corridor. She braced herself, then walked up to Viscount Roteshu. He was standing in front of the door, yawning with his hand in his pocket, but he grinned as soon as he saw Rashta. The windows at the villa had thin, translucent curtains. Because the curtains were rarely in use, aesthetic was emphasized rather than practicality, and I woke up to bright sunlight in my eyes. I decided the curtains needed changing right away. It was only after I sat up groggily in bed that I realized I was in a different place, and it was my birthday. Sovietichu, it was 7 a.m. according to my watch, and considering that it took about 12 hours to get here from the capital, I doubted that he had arrived yet. Perhaps by the time I had breakfast, he would have arrived and then fallen asleep. I yawned again and got out of bed. I remembered my usual routine, but realized that I didn't bring any work. Today really was a day for idle reading and resting. It had been a while since I spent the whole day on myself. After concluding that this trip was a good idea, I went to the bathroom, brushed my teeth and took a quick shower. Your Majesty, you should have called me. Countess Jubal gave a sudden exclamation when I left the bedroom with my hair already done. I've been waiting for you to call. It's fine, I'm just going to relax today. Well, I suppose what would you like for breakfast? Just bread and juice, please. While Countess Jubal was busy preparing breakfast, I went into the drawing room and took my unfinished book out of the bag. I opened my book and reclined against an armchair. After some time I heard the door open. I thought it was Countess Jubal at first, but the footsteps sounded heavy. When I looked up I saw a smiling Sovietichu in a suit. You came here to rest and you're reading? Your Majesty, I closed the book and stood up. Despite the fact that he was smiling, he looked exhausted, as if he had been riding in a carriage all night. Did you just arrive? Yes. He pointed his finger towards the window, and through it I spotted several servants unloading the carriage. Sovietichu spoke, his voice a murmur. I'm tired. He collapsed on the couch next to me, and put his head backwards and closed his eyes. He looked like he was about to pass out from exhaustion. I touched his forehead and found it was warm. Your Majesty, are you sleeping? Maybe he was asleep then. Sovietichu opened his eyes and stared at me with wide eyes. You have a slight fever. You should sleep. I carefully took my hands off his forehead and made to stand up. Is there an official on standby? Sovietichu grabbed my wrist as soon as I was about to get up. I looked back at him, and he ordered me to stay before getting up to leave the room. When he returned, there was a box in his hand. A gift, you knew it right away. Sovietichu smiled lightly and held the gift towards me. It was a music box. When I opened the lid, tinkling music floated out, and a shining ring was displayed in the center. There was also a silver necklace and earrings on either side of it. Thank you. With a smile, Sovietichu lifted the necklace from the box. Allow me. I hesitated and took the box with one hand, and with the other I lifted my hair and turned around. His hands felt feverishly hot against my neck as he placed on the necklace. Then suddenly something warm and smooth touched my neck. I was staring at the earrings in the box when I looked up in surprise. Once again I felt his lips gently caress my ears. I let go of my hair and closed the lid on the box. As soon as I turned around, Sovietichu crushed his lips against mine. Instead of reciprocating, however, I kept my mouth closed and backed away. Sovietichu looked surprised, but when our eyes met he smiled and he held out his hand carefully to me. I stared at his lean fingers and shook my head. Empress, his voice was soft, but I shook my head again. I didn't know why he wanted to kiss me all of a sudden, but I didn't want to do it with him now. He had been with Rashta for over a month. It was awkward to kiss those lips that had already kissed someone else. All right, Sovietichu lowered his arm, and the room lapsed into an uncomfortable silence. He stared at the chair I had been sitting on a moment ago, while I stood still with the music box in hand. It took me a moment to realize that music was still trickling from the box, and I shut the lid. Sovieshu turned his eyes away from the chair, looked at the box, then looked at me again. Sometimes you are like a colleague, not a spouse. A spouse is also a colleague who walk with life through together. If spouses and colleagues are the same, then what's the point of marriage? Sovieshu sighed and left the room, claiming he was tired. I heard the door close. I closed my eyes and took a shuddering breath. A moment later the door opened again, and when I opened my eyes I saw Countess Jubal entering, glancing backwards over her shoulder. She set down the tray of bread, juice, and jam, but she kept looking back. Your Majesty, did you fight with the Emperor? She must have come across Sovieshu on the way here. The Emperor seems to have a fever, so please send the official. I ignored her question and picked up a plate. I want to eat alone. Will that be all right, Countess Jubal? I was left completely alone in the room, going through the mechanical movements of eating my breakfast. The bread was crisp on the outside and soft on the inside, and the strawberry jam was as sweet as a spoonful of sugar. The green grape juice was cool and refreshing as well, but I found I couldn't enjoy the taste. Was it because of the hollow feeling in my heart? I was confused for a moment whether I was eating or not. Finally, after nibbling only half the bread, I set it down. I took a sip of juice when I saw a familiar bird by the window, golden feathers, purple eyes, a large size, a handsome beak. Queen, it looked like him, but how could be here? I walked over to the window to open it, and the large bird hopped inside the room. Queen, it was really Queen. For whatever reason, my eyes started to sting with tears. How did you come here, Queen? Were you looking for me? Queen nodded, then wrapped his wings around me in an embrace. Queen, it was as if he were trying to comfort me. No matter how large a bird was, it couldn't be bigger than a human, so Queen's wings didn't completely cover me. He wrapped himself around me as much as he could, however, and my heart was moved by his effort. I kissed him on the forehead and he froze as usual, but he did not pull away. Was he really trying to cheer me up? I had heard that some animals could instinctively sense human emotions. Perhaps Queen knew what I was thinking and didn't even realize it. I pulled him away from my arms and set him on my lap to hug him again. I might not be able to live without you, Queen. What if you have to go back to the Western Kingdom? Should I follow you? Queen nodded enthusiastically and cawed. Where on earth did Prince Heinlein get a handsome boy like you? As if trying to make himself look more beautiful, he whitened his claws and looked at me with large, clear eyes. Should I bring a bird the same kind as Queen? Queen, if I get you a baby brother, will you be nice to him? This time Queen shook his head violently, and I couldn't help but double over in laughter. Suddenly, Your Majesty, Countess Jubal burst into the drawing room. She looked surprised to see Queen in my arms, but she shook her head as if it were not the time. Your Majesty, the Emperor has collapsed. Where is he now? We moved him to a nearby vacant room and called the official. Send him to the capital and tell him to bring a doctor. Just in case. I hurriedly stood up. Queen sat down by the windowsill. He looked like he didn't want to go, but I couldn't play with him now. Be a good boy, go to your master, Queen. Wait, Countess Jubal. Yes, Your Majesty. Please give Queen some water. He flew a long way. Yes, Queen, get some water and rest before going back, all right? I kissed Queen on the forehead and rushed out of the room. Well, have you considered it? Rashta sat crouched in her chair, glancing suspiciously over at Viscount Roteshu. She had succeeded in sending him back the night before because it was late, but he had returned in the morning. Considered what? Joining me, Viscount Roteshu spoke in a leisurely manner, as if he had no intention of leaving. Rashta clenched her coffee cup, resisting the urge to throw it. The nobles all want to get back in your favor again. Isn't this all due to my help? Your help? It was Duke Elgi that helped me. And wasn't it because of me that Duke Elgi went to your side? Rashta smiled bitterly at his brazen answer. He gave a small hum as he gathered his hands together and rested his chin on them. I need some money now. He wanted money? Rashta laughed derisively at his request. Though she had expected it, she couldn't believe that he was asking for money this early in the morning. How can anyone be like this? She had hated Viscount Roteshu for a long time, but now he was even worse. However, he was a man of influence and power, while she had nothing. She had buried her hatred under her fear, but now that the fear had gone, the hateful feelings that had once been clouded over began to emerge. Like now you said you would help Rashta. She spoke coldly, suppressing the urge to yell abuse at him. You've done nothing yet you want money? I went to all kinds of parties uninvited to save your reputation. Wasn't that help? Nothing helped until Duke Eliie appeared. Her voice was harsh, and she quickly continued. Just so you know, Duke Eliie doesn't care if I'm a slave or not, so don't try to blackmail me for this. He said that now? Yes, Viscount Roteshu clicked his tongue and leaned back against his chair. You actually believe that? You're running out of time, Rashta. She didn't want to speak to him anymore. She leaned over to ring the bell, but he pushed it aside. My silence comes with a price, Rashta. I'm raising your baby, so you should at least be willing to pay the expenses. The expenses? Do you know how much it costs to dress, raise, and feed a baby? You should pay for it, of course. Do you think I should raise him for free? Rashta's jaw dropped. His lofty manner sparked her anger, but ranting at him was not the answer to the problem. She didn't even know if the baby was hers. How much do you need? Well, the cost of living and food has gone down. Let's see. 100 krut or so will do. Jewelry is an acceptable payment if you don't have money. Rashta went to her jewelry box and took out 3 of her smallest, unattractive rings, then held it out to him. She thought it was a waste, but it was better than him spreading rumors about a baby. These are beautiful. Viscount Roteshu selected a ring he was satisfied with and tucked it in his breast pocket. As Rashta watched him, she thought, this is not the time. I need to find out about the baby before he makes any bigger demands. Before Viscount Roteshu would bring the baby, she had to go to his estate and confirm his identity herself. And if he turned out to be fake? Rashta gripped her skirt tightly. Whatever would the outcome, she might just go mad. Rashta, can I give you a piece of advice? Viscount Roteshu stood up from his seat, looking down at Rashta with a mocking smile. Yesterday the Emperor and Empress went to the villa, didn't they? They must be having a good time with only the 2 of them there. The Empress might try to change the Emperor's feelings. What are you talking about? You understand that the best. He gave an amused giggle, and winked at the cane leaning against the table. Poor little Rashta with no one to help her. If the Emperor tired of you, you will be abandoned. So think about accepting my help. I expect you to be a little more cooperative next time. He patted her on the shoulder and whistled as he left. As soon as he was gone, Rashta hurled her mug across the room. The anxiety Viscount Roteshu caused her only grew when Baron Lant came to her at dinner. Miss Rashta, I'm afraid the Emperor may not be able to come back tomorrow. What Rashta was forced to swallow her steak, and she looked at Baron Lant in surprise. Why isn't today the Empress' birthday? Why wouldn't he come back tomorrow? That was the original plan, he sighed. The Emperor is sick. A man rushed here from the villa to inform us. He didn't look optimistic about the Emperor's condition, and Rashta felt her blood drain. His Majesty is sick. Her face turned pale, and Baron Lant believed she was deeply concerned about her lover. Oh no, Miss Rashta, it's not that serious. Don't worry. But she wasn't listening to his words. Was Sovieshu really sick? Perhaps the Emperor and Empress wanted to spend more time together because they were getting along? But even if he was sick, that was still a problem. If the Empress stayed by his side and cared for him, he might forget his feelings about Rashta. Miss Rashta really loves the Emperor. Yes, Rashta hesitated before posing a question. Baron Lant, can Rashta go to the villa? Rashta wants to look after His Majesty. I'm sorry. Granting permission is beyond my power. But the Emperor and Empress will send for you if they wish you to be there. Rashta nodded nervously. The next day, however, the news became worse. Although Sovieshu was not seriously ill, his fever refused to subside and he had to stay another week longer. That was not good for her. But the Emperor and Empress were not romantic even before I became a concubine. Their relationship had been stayed for years now, and she didn't reckon they would become close all of a sudden. Rashta tried to stay calm, but it didn't work. Viscount Rotesh's threats about her baby fogged her mind, and with the anxiety about the Empress throne on top of it, her heart raced. The third day after Viscount Rotesh's visit, Duke Eliie brought up his concerns about Rashta's state. "My dear, you haven't been looking good lately. Are you all right?" "No, what's wrong? Is it because the Emperor is sick?" Well, Rashta hesitated before speaking carefully. "Rashta feels a little sorry for the Empress." "What about Her Majesty all of a sudden?" "The Emperor's unwell, but it's the Empress who is staying in the villa to nurse him. Even when it's fine for her to come back. But even if she stays, the Emperor will constantly be thinking of Rashta while he's ill. Because of that, Rashta feels uncomfortable." At her morose expression, Duke Eliie snorted. Rashta widened her eyes at him. His jaw was clenched as if he were trying to hold back laughter. "Why are you smiling?" "Sorry, but it's a very obvious lie, miss. No, Rashta is serious." "I'm sorry, but when it comes to men and women, I'm knowledgeable, right?" "It's all right, you were just so cute." He looked at her with a thoughtful expression, and then shook his head and continued playfully. "You seem concerned that the Empress will become close to the Emperor again. That's how about this?" Duke Eliie leaned in close, and her face turned red. She couldn't resist her curiosity, however, and said, "What?" What he said next surprised her. "Shall I tempt the Empress? If she loves me, she won't become close to the Emperor. Would that make you feel better? What do you think?" He pulled away from her and stared at her with shining green eyes. Rashta blinked and paused for a moment, but eventually shook her head. "That's not possible." "Why, I'm confident. The Empress has lived her whole life surrounded with fine things. On the contrary, she would likely be more attracted to a very ordinary man. But the Duke is of high birth. If we were to give the Empress a lover, wouldn't an ordinary person be better?" What surprised you the most in this video? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, please like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit the bell icon for updates.